The sky above my ranch looked soft and warm that late afternoon, like someone brushed melted butter across a big blue canvas. And the sun was slowly drifting toward the red hills in the distance, glowing like a sleepy campfire ember. And for a moment, everything around me felt so peaceful, it almost didn't feel real. Like the whole world had wrapped itself in a quiet blanket and handed me a moment of calm that I hadn't asked for, but desperately needed. I stood on my wooden porch leaning on the railing that I had sanded down with my own hands last spring, feeling the roughness of the old cedar wood under my palm, feeling the steady thump of my heartbeat slowing as the breeze pushed through the tall grass like a gentle whisper, and I breathed in the warm desert air that always felt like home to me, dusty and dry, but full of memories that clung to every inch of this land. The ranch stretched out wide in every direction, miles of open space where my horses grazed and my cattle wandered, and my dogs chased shadows just because they could, and the colors around me looked so damn beautiful that it almost made my chest hurt. Deep oranges on the hills, soft pinks in the clouds, long shadows stretching across the dirt like lazy old snakes, and I felt a kind of pride in my bones, the kind that only comes from working the land day after day and still loving it even when it breaks your back. Everything on this ranch was built by me. Every fence post hammered in during the burning summer heat, every barn plank cut in the middle of freezing winter mornings, every trail carved by my boots and sweat, and sometimes by my tears too. And standing there in the gold light, I felt the weight of all those years settle around me like a warm coat that had been waiting just for me. But even with all that peace, something in the air felt off, a strange tension that clung to the breeze like static, something whispering at the back of my mind saying, "Hey buddy, keep your eyes open, something's coming." And I didn't like it one bit. It was like the land itself had gone quiet in a different way, not calm but cautious. The birds had stopped chirping, the dogs had their ears up even though they didn't bark, and the horses were standing still near the fence lines staring down the dirt road like they sensed something I couldn't see. Yet animals know things before people do. Always have. And when they act nervous, it twists something deep in your stomach. Something primal that tells you danger is sitting just outside the edge of your sight. I rubbed my thumb along the edge of the porch railing, the wood warm from the sun, and tried to shake the feeling off. But the more I looked around, the harder it was to ignore that strange heaviness in the air, like a storm cloud made of worry instead of rain was slowly drifting toward my ranch. I whispered to myself, "Easy, now, don't get all jumpy." Probably nothing. But my voice didn't sound convincing even to me. And that bothered the hell out of me, because I'm not the type that gets spooked without reason. Life on a ranch teaches you to trust your gut, and mine was growling like an old hound dog that smells a coyote creeping in the dark. I took a slow walk across the porch, boots thudding softly on the wood, feeling the dust under the soles, feeling the weight of years in each step. And as I looked out over the wide open land, I had this strange ache in my chest, like something inside me knew that the peace I was feeling wasn't going to last much longer. The sky was too pretty, the air too still, the moment too perfect, like the world gives you that kind of beauty right before it hits you with something big. That's how life works out here. Calm then chaos, quiet then trouble, peace then a punch straight to the soul. I leaned back against the porch post and let my head tilt slightly as I watched the sun inch lower, the light catching the tops of the cedar trees and lighting them up like they were dipped in fire, and the wind moved through them slow and low, making them whisper in a language older than any of us. My chest rose and fell as I breathed that quiet in, holding on to it, even though deep down I had this uneasy feeling that the moment was slipping away from me, that something was walking toward my life with heavy boots and a bad attitude. Sometimes your heart knows before your eyes do, and my heart felt tight, like someone had wrapped a rope around it. The dry dirt road leading up to the ranch curved from behind the hills, a long strip of pale brown earth that had seen countless sunrises and storms and boot tracks over the years, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming down that road, something I wasn't ready for, something I didn't ask for. The wind picked up a little and brought with it a scent that sent a shiver through me, the smell of dust and heat, but also something metallic, something sharp. Like trouble had a smell of its own, and the breeze carried it straight to me. I narrowed my eyes and stared at the road, even though nothing was there yet, nothing but shadows and dust. But my instincts kept telling me, "Look sharper, buddy, something's off." The dogs came trotting up onto the porch, tails low, ears stiff, not barking but alert. And that made my skin prickle because these dogs usually bark at everything from wandering deer to tumbleweeds blowing the wrong direction, but now they were. Too quiet, too tense, like they didn't want to make noise in case something heard them. I knelt and scratched behind their ears, feeling their muscles twitch, feeling their nerves jump under my fingers, and whispered, "You all right, boys?" But they didn't relax at all, just kept staring toward the dirt road like they were waiting for something dark to crawl out of the horizon. The horses in the pasture stomped their hooves and tossed their heads, and the cattle shifted restlessly, and every living thing on my ranch seemed to be bracing for something I still couldn't see. I stood again, rubbing my hands together, trying to warm the sudden chill crawling over my arms, even though the air was still warm. And that chill wasn't weather, it was worry, it was fear, it was the kind of feeling that wraps around your spine and whispers, "Hey man, something's about to go real sideways." The sun dipped lower, and the colors around me deepened. The gold turning to orange, the orange bleeding into red, the shadows stretching long and thin until they looked like dark fingers reaching across the ground. And the whole ranch took on this strange glow, like the land was holding its breath. I swallowed hard, feeling the dryness in my throat, feeling that same dryness in my chest. And I wished I could go back to the peace I felt just 15 minutes earlier. But once worry starts digging into your ribs, it doesn't let go easy. There was a feeling inside me that had been growing for months, a quiet simmer that I ignored because life keeps you busy, and sometimes you don't want to admit that something's wrong until it smacks you in the face. But standing there on that porch watching the world go still made that feeling rise up like smoke from a fire that had been hiding under the ashes. I had heard rumors in town, whispers about the HOA folks pushing their weight around, showing up unannounced at people's homes, acting like they owned the land even when they didn't. And folks said they were getting older, nastier, meaner, but that was town talk. And people in town love to talk big, and I never imagined they'd have anything to do with me. I was out here miles from anyone, minding my own damn business, living quiet, breaking no laws, hurting no one. Still, something told me that all that quiet wasn't going to stay quiet, that something was coming straight for me whether I liked it or not. The sun was almost gone now, slipping behind the hills like it was hiding, and the air turned heavier than before, thick with tension, thick with the kind of silence that feels like the pause before thunder cracks open the sky. I crossed my arms, staring at the dirt road one more time, and for a second I could swear I heard something faint, an engine maybe, or maybe just the wind shifting. But the sound disappeared before I could be sure. Even so, my heart thumped hard in my chest, a slow, heavy beat that echoed in my ribs like a warning drum. I whispered into the cooling air, "Something's coming, buddy, brace yourself." And even though I tried to sound calm, my voice shook just a little. This ranch was my home, my pride, my whole life woven into wood and soil, and the idea that something or someone might come here, trying to tear that peace away, filled me with a slow rising fire. Not anger yet, but something close, something waiting to explode if pushed. The sky darkened more, and the first stars peeked out above the hills, twinkling soft and far away. Unaware of the fear sitting heavy in my chest, I took one last breath of the quiet evening air, letting it sink into me, letting it fill my lungs and steady me, though it didn't work much. And I whispered to the land, "I love you, I protect you no matter what comes." And that's when I felt it, not a sound, not a sight, but a shift in the world, like something huge had stepped onto the dirt road miles away, and the earth itself trembled just enough for my soul to feel it. Trouble was coming, and it was coming fast. The night was just about ready to swallow the last of the sun when I finally heard it for real, that low rumble far off down the dirt road. Not thunder, not wind, but engines rolling slow and heavy like they owned the place. And the sound crawled right up my spine and sat there like a cold hand on the back of my neck. The dogs lifted their heads in the same second, ears sharp, noses twitching, and they let out these low, uneasy growls that I could feel in my boots, deep and shaky and full of warning. My heart started beating harder, not fast yet, but heavier, like each thump was trying to tell me, "Hey man, this is it. This is what you've been feeling all evening." I stepped off the porch, the wood creaking under my weight, and walked out into the yard, dust crunching under my boots as I moved. My eyes locked on that stretch of dirt road curling between the hills. The sky behind the hills was fading from orange to this dark purple blue, but the road glowed faint in the leftover light, like a pale scar across the land. And from around that last bend, I saw it at last, headlights, bright white beams cutting through the dust. then another pair right behind them, then another, a whole line of them, slow and steady, no rush, like they knew I could see them and wanted me to. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. And for a moment, I just stood there breathing shallow. Watching those lights creep closer, the engines grew louder. That deep city growl that did not belong out here on this old dirt road made for tractors and feed trucks and old rusted pickups. I felt anger bubble up beneath my fear, little hot sparks popping in my gut, because whoever they were, they sure as hell did not ask if they were welcome on my land. The horses edged away from the fence line, ears pinned back, hooves nervous in the dust, and the cattle bunched together like they were hiding behind each other. And I could feel the whole ranch reacting like a living thing, like the land itself was flinching as those trucks came closer. I could finally see them through the settling dust, shiny black SUVs, big and polished and out of place. The kind of vehicles you see parked outside fancy offices or government buildings, not rolling down some busted ranch road that barely holds together when it rains. They had these sharp angles and dark windows, and even from where I stood, I could see the reflection of the dying sun on the polished metal. Like they were made of smooth black stone, there was something cold about them, something heartless. Like the people inside treated land and homes and lives like numbers on a page. I swallowed hard, my throat dry like I had swallowed sand, and I could feel the weight of everything I owned and loved pressing against my shoulders. The barn I built, the animals I raised, the fences I fixed again and again, the memories buried all over this ground. Those trucks rolled right up toward my gate without slowing, and I could see it now, stamped clear on the side in bold letters that made my stomach twist. Homeowners Association, not a friendly local club kind of name. More like a weapon if you said it the wrong way. And out here in this county, everybody had learned to fear those neat little letters. The first SUV stopped just outside the main gate, dust rolling around it like fog, and the others lined up behind it in a neat row, like soldiers in a parade. For a second, everything went weirdly quiet. No crickets, no birds. Even the dogs just stood there stiff and staring. The only sound was the ticking of the hot engines cooling, and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I felt small and huge at the same time. Small compared to those big shiny trucks and the suits inside them, but huge because this was my land and my home, and there is nothing bigger than the weight of that when someone comes to mess with it. The driver door of the front SUV opened, and a man stepped out, tall, sharp suit, tie tied around his neck like a noose he was proud of, shoes way too clean for this dusty road. Behind him, more doors opened, agents spilling out from each vehicle, clipboards in their hands, phones ready, tablet screens glowing in the dim light. They all looked the same in a way, hard eyes, tight mouths, stiff shoulders, like they practiced their expressions in a mirror before they left the office. Not one of them looked at the land with any kind of respect. Their eyes slid right past the barn and the animals and the trees like they were just background scenery in some show that was all about them. The lead guy spotted me standing in the yard, boots planted in the dirt, hands hanging by my sides but curled just enough that my knuckles were white, and he started walking toward the gate with this confident city stride that made my jaw clench. He pushed open the gate without asking, without knocking, without even nodding, just shoved it aside like it was already his. And that tiny metal squeak from the hinge cut through me like a blade. Something in me snapped right there. Not loud, but deadly clear, like a rope breaking after holding a load too heavy for too long. My mind started racing, thoughts piling up fast and messy. What the hell are they doing here? Did I miss some letter in the mail? Did they make some rule I never heard about? Can they even come out this far? Do they think they can just walk onto my land because they have suits and badges and shiny trucks? I wanted to shout, "What do you think you are doing out here?" But the words stuck in my throat because the anger was mixing with fear, and both together made my chest feel like it was on fire. The dogs barked thin, sharp and rough, stepping slightly in front of me like they were trying to shield me, teeth bared, tails stiff, and the agents flinched just a little before they tried to hide it. The lead agent lifted a hand like he was waving off some fly and snapped at the others to stay back, his voice smooth and clipped, practiced, like someone who spends his life telling people what to do. He was looking at me like I was some problem to solve, not a human with a life and a soul and sweat in this land. He opened his mouth and started talking all slow and official, throwing out words like compliance and violations and association policy. And every single one of those words felt like a boot stepping on my neck. He didn't say hello. He didn't say sorry for dropping in uninvited. He didn't say your place looks nice, he just started listing all the things he thought were wrong with what he saw. That barn might be non-compliant, those extra structures may not be authorized, we have received several complaints, we are here to inspect for violations. His voice had this smug tone, like this was just another day at the office, just another box to check off on his list. But for me this was my whole damn world. He was talking about each word he spoke felt like he was scraping at my pride with a dull knife. I could feel the heat rising up my neck, my cheeks burning, my eyes stinging a little with angry tears. I refused to let fall, my hands shook, but I tried to keep my voice steady as I said, I never signed up for any of this. Nobody from your people ever helped build this place. You got no right to storm up here like you own it. He just smiled, this little half smile that made me want to knock it right off his face. And he started talking about zoning and boundaries and community standards. Words that sounded real fancy, but felt empty and cruel out here under the fading sky. He said something about how this land technically fell under some extended development plan, how there were new regulations, how notices were sent, how I should have known, and in that moment I realized something deep in my gut. They did not come out here to talk, they came out here to take control, to take power. To take whatever they decided they wanted. They were not here as neighbors or helpers. They were here as invaders wearing nice clothes and fake smiles. Behind him, the other agents started wandering the edge of my property, pointing at things, taking pictures, writing notes, leaning on my fences like they were testing them, like they were already planning what to tear down. One of them got too close to the horses, and they snorted and backed away, ears pinned, clearly upset, and I wanted to yell at him to step back, to show some respect. But my focus was locked on that lead agent standing just a few feet from me with that smug look on his face. The land around us glowed red in the last of the sunset, shadows long and dark, dust floating in the air like tiny ghosts. And the whole scene felt unreal, like some twisted painting where city and country collide, and only one of them walks away still breathing easy. I could feel my heartbeat hammering in my chest, each beat spilling more anger into my veins, mixing with the fear until my hands were buzzing with it. This ranch was my safe place, my sanctuary, and now it felt invaded and small, crowded by men who had never lifted a hay bale in their life, but somehow thought they could decide what was right or wrong out here. The lead agent took another step closer, invading even more of my space, and lowered his voice like he was pretending to be kind, telling me that if I cooperated things could go smooth, that if I resisted they had ways of dealing with that. The threat sat there between us, quiet but sharp as broken glass. He might as well have said, we can make your life hell if we feel like it. A deep hot rage lit up inside my chest, brighter and stronger than the setting sun. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something break loose in me. All the years of being pushed around by paperwork in offices and people who never even saw the land they signed papers about, all the times I swallowed my anger and kept my head down just to keep peace, all of it rose up like a wildfire roaring through dry grass. I stared straight into his eyes, not blinking, not backing down, and I felt my voice finally come out low and rough. You picked the wrong ranch to storm, the wrong man to push. And in that moment, with darkness thickening around us and the last strip of sun dying behind the red hills, I knew one thing clear as day: whatever happened next, I was not going to let them walk all over my home without a fight. The night settled thick and heavy around the ranch, the last bit of sunlight fading into the hills like someone pulled a blanket over the world, and I stood there staring at those stiff-suited HOA agents wandering my land like they had some right to breathe the same dust my boots had walked on for years. And something inside me twisted so hard, I felt it down to my bones. The lead agent kept talking in that smooth, bossy voice of his, throwing out fancy words like compliance and violation and mandatory assessment, all of it dripping with arrogance like honey that had gone sour. And every word hit me like a slap across the face. He thought he was in control. He thought he was the big shot out here. He thought his slick haircut and shiny shoes meant something on this dirt. But out here the land doesn't care about titles or badges or board members. Out here the land answers only to sweat and time and grit. I felt this heat rise inside my chest. Not quick, but slow, real slow, like embers waking up in a fire pit after someone pokes them with a metal rod. And every second that passed made that heat burn hotter and hotter until my skin felt tight and my breath felt thick. My hands curled into fists without me telling them to, my knuckles stretching white under the skin, and the muscles in my shoulders tensed like ropes pulled too tight. and I just stared at that man like he was the storm rolling down on me. The dogs beside me growled low, deep growls that shook in their throats. Hackles raised, ears pinned back, their bodies tense like they were seconds away from lunging. And I felt that same wild tension racing through my own blood. The horses stamped and snorted in the pasture, their bodies shifting, tails flicking fast, eyes wide and shining in the growing dark. And even the cattle huddled close like they knew something big and ugly was brewing. The lead agent kept stepping closer, talking down to me like he was lecturing some kid instead of a grown man who built this place with nothing but stubbornness and busted knuckles. And I could feel each step of his stomping right across my pride. He pointed at my barn with his clipboard like it offended him personally, like the wooden boards I nailed with my bare hands were some crime against humanity. And he said with this smug tone that the structure might be subject to removal if it did not meet updated codes. My mind went blank for a second, just blank, like static buzzing in my skull, and then something snapped. Not loud, not dramatic, not like a firework or a gunshot, but quiet and deadly real, like the sound of a rope breaking under too much weight. Every memory of every time someone tried to push me around came rushing in. Every time I swallowed my anger to keep the peace, every time I did things the polite way, every time some suit or official or jerk from town tried to tell me how to live on land they never worked a day in their life. All those moments stacked inside my chest like wood on a bonfire. And right then someone lit a match. I felt it burn through me, slow at first, then fast. A wave of pure fire rolling up from my stomach to my throat, and my vision sharpened in a way that made everything around me feel almost too clear. The dust hanging in the air, the flicker of light on the SUV windows, the stiff suits, the sharp clipboards, the snide expressions. All of it came into focus so sharp I could feel the edges scraping at my nerves. My heartbeat slammed in my ears like someone beating a drum, made of thunder, heavy and fierce and unstoppable. And I could swear the ground under my boots vibrated with it. The agent moved another step closer, invading my space again, and I smelled his cologne, some expensive city scent that didn't belong within 100 miles of dirt and cedar and sweat. And that smell pushed me over the edge. He said something like, "Sir, we need full access to your property for thorough evaluation." And that voice of his, that smooth, fake, polite tone, made something harden in my chest. My throat tightened, and the air felt too thick to breathe right. And in that moment, I realized something I had tried not to think about for years. I was tired of bending, tired of being quiet, tired of being pushed, tired of living nice, while other people walked all over what I built. He reached out to open my barn door, without asking, without permission, without a damn shred of respect. And that was it. The snap inside me turned into something fierce and loud, like a wildfire, exploding out of dry brush. And I stepped forward fast enough that the agent actually froze in place. I didn't touch him, I didn't raise a hand, but the way I moved made him jerk back just a little, and that tiny step of his filled me with a strange kind of power, the kind that says, "Hey man, you crossed the line, and now you know it." My voice came out raw and cracked but strong, fuller than it had ever been. I said, "You take one more step toward that barn, and we're going to have a problem. A real big one." The words rolled out like thunder, even without a single period. And the air around us changed, heavy and sharp. The other agents looked up from whatever they were writing, their heads snapping toward me, their eyes widening just enough to tell me they hadn't expected me to stand my ground. People like them never expect pushback from folks like me. They think quiet means weak. They think humble means scared. They think country means stupid. They were wrong, real wrong. The lead agent tried to recover his composure, lifting his chin like he was offended, adjusting his tie even though the night wind had barely touched it. And he said, "Sir, we are authorized to enter any area we deem necessary." But his voice wasn't as steady as before. There was a slight wobble, a crack in the polished armor. And I saw fear flicker in his eyes, even if he tried to hide it. And that flicker fueled the fire inside me, a fire made from years of sweat, years of building, years of loving this land like it was blood of my blood. I took another step closer, closing the distance he had tried to impose between us, and I stared straight into his eyes. Eyes that suddenly didn't look quite as confident. He opened his mouth to speak again, but I cut him off with a low growl of a voice that even surprised me. I said, "This land is mine. Every inch, every rock, every blade of grass. And you don't walk around it like you own it. Not tonight. Not ever." Behind me, the dogs growled louder, the ranch echoing that same energy, like the whole land was speaking through me. Even the wind shifted, brushing against my shoulders like it was reminding me I wasn't alone on this dirt. The agent straightened his clipboard against his chest like he was using it as a shield, and he said something about legal consequences and refusal to cooperate. But his voice kept skipping like a record hitting scratches. The fear in him was growing. He could smell the danger in the air, not violence, but something worse, a man protecting. What's as I could feel my heartbeat pushing against my ribs so hard it almost hurt, and I felt sweat running down my back. Even though the night air was cool, anger and fear mixed together in a way that made everything feel electric, buzzing under my skin like lightning waiting to strike. The other agents shifted their weight uneasily, not sure what to do, not sure if they should step back or forward. And their hesitation hung in the air like a thick fog. My whole body felt tight, coiled like a spring ready to snap again. And I could feel the weight of generations standing behind me, my father, my grandfather, every calloused-handed ancestor who fought to keep their land safe. Their echoes lived in my blood. My eyes burned with heat, and my breath hitching just a little, and I whispered to myself, don't back down. Not now. Not ever. The agent must have heard the whisper, because he blinked, confusion rushing across his face like he had never met someone who talked to themselves before. City folks don't understand that talking to the land, talking to the air, talking to your own heartbeat is survival out here. He stepped back finally, just one step. But it was enough to send a shockwave through the others, a ripple of fear, a spark of doubt, a sign that they weren't as invincible as they tried to pretend. And when I saw that step, that tiny retreat, that small crack in their fearless act, something in my heart snapped completely free. All the fear, all the tension, all the worry, all the second-guessing broke apart like glass under a hammer. And in its place rose a force so strong, I felt like the earth itself was lifting me from underneath, holding me up, pushing me forward. A force that said, this is your home, your land, your story, your fight. No suit, no badge, no board. No man could take that from me. Not then, not ever. The moment my heart snapped, I became unshakable. The night air pressed in thick and heavy around me, the kind of air that makes every breath feel like you're pulling in smoke from a slow-burning fire. And my heart was pounding so hard inside my chest, I could feel each beat rattling against my ribs like a fist knocking from the inside. Those HOA agents were still scattered across my land, their stiff suits looking more out of place with every passing second, their clipboards shining under the faint moonlight like metal shields. And my anger was burning up high enough that I could almost taste it on my tongue. That lead agent stood there in front of me, with a face caught between pride and fear, trying real hard to hold on to the last scraps of control he thought he had. But the land was whispering in my ear louder than ever, saying, buddy, you need to make a stand now or lose everything that matters. I took one step back, slow but firm, not because I was scared, but because I needed a second to breathe, a second to think, a second to feel. The whole weight of what was happening. The ranch around me was alive with tension, the horses pacing restless in the dim light, the cattle shifting and kicking up dust, the dogs beside me with stiff tails and sharp eyes, and even the old cedar trees seemed to lean in like they were waiting for my next move. My hands shook a bit, not from fear, but from the raw fire inside me that had nowhere to go yet. And I knew deep in my bones that words weren't going to be enough anymore. These men didn't understand words from folks like me. They only understood force, not violence, not harm, but presence, strength, a message they couldn't misunderstand even if they tried. The lead agent said something again, something about regulations and enforcement and mandatory compliance, his voice trying to stay steady, but cracking just a little on the edges, and his words washed over me like cold, dirty water, making that fire inside me rise higher and hotter. He had no respect for this land, no respect for me, no respect for anything outside his little printed rulebook tucked under his arm like some holy scripture. And the second he stepped toward my barn earlier, the second he reached out like he had any right to touch what I built, something in me came undone. I took another step backward toward the porch, slow enough that none of the agents felt threatened, but firm enough that they watched me with nervous eyes. The dogs trotted beside me, growling low, keeping their bodies between me and those agents like they were small shields made of fur and loyalty. The porch loomed behind me, dark and quiet, the wooden boards glowing faint under the moon. And I felt the memories stored in that would rise up around me. Nights fixing tools, mornings drinking coffee with the sunrise, storms, weathered winters, survived nights spent building dreams plank by plank. I reached the steps and turned away from the agents just long enough to climb up the porch, my boots thudding heavy against the old boards. Each step sounding like a drum hit in the stillness. As I reached the door, I felt this strange calm settle over me. Not peaceful but focused, clear, sharp like a blade. And I pushed open the door slow enough that it didn't creak inside the house. The darkness wrapped around me like a cool blanket, and the faint smell of cedar and dust and old leather filled my lungs, grounding me, reminding me who I was and what I stood for. My eyes drifted to the wooden rack on the wall just above the firewood box, the rack with the shotgun resting across it, the same shotgun that had hung there for years, untouched except for cleaning and oiling. It wasn't a weapon of violence. It was a symbol, a warning, a protector of boundaries, a voice louder than words, a thing folks out here understood. Without needing explanation, I stepped toward it slow, almost reverent, feeling the weight of the moment pressing into my shoulders like a heavy hand. And I reached up, fingers brushing the smooth wood of the stock. The wood was warm from the house air, warm from the memories, warm from all the stories it carried. I wrapped my hand around it, firm but gentle, and lifted it off the rack. It felt solid, steady, like a promise, like a backbone carved from oak. As I held it in my hands, the fire inside my chest steadied instead of burning wild, and I felt a strange sort of strength roll through me. A reminder that I wasn't helpless, I wasn't small, I wasn't just some rancher to be pushed around by men with fancy titles. No, I was a man standing on generations of grit, on soil soaked with sweat from those who came before me, on dreams built from nothing but stubbornness and hope. The weight of the shotgun sat across my arms with a kind of comfort I couldn't explain, and as I breathed in deep, I felt my heartbeat slow into something cold, measured, focused. I wasn't out for trouble, I wasn't out for harm, I was out to protect what was mine, and that's something no law, no rule book, no polished shoe could take away. I walked back to the door, boots quiet on the wooden floor, the dogs circling my legs like they could feel the shift in the air. And as I stepped back onto the porch, the night seemed to stretch out around me in silence. The moonlight touched the shotgun gently, glinting off the barrel, and that light carried across the yard like a whisper of warning. The agents saw me the second I stepped outside. Every one of them turned, every one of them froze, every one of them stiffened like statues caught in a lightning flash. I didn't raise the shotgun, didn't point it, didn't move it in a threatening way. I cradled it in my arms like it was part of me, steady, calm, anchored, but the message was there, clearer than any words I could ever speak. Back off, you crossed the line, this is my home. The lead agent's face drained of color, so fast, it was like watching milk spill into water, his jaw dropping just a little before he snapped it shut, swallowing hard, his eyes wide and shining under the soft moon glow. His clipboard wobbled in his hands, his tie fluttered in the night breeze, and the confidence he rode in on vanished like dust in a storm. I took one step down from the porch, boots hitting the dirt with a heavy thud that echoed across the yard like a heartbeat made of thunder, and I let my voice roll out into the night, low and steady. The kind of voice that comes from somewhere deeper than anger. You have stepped far enough, turn around, now. No shouting, no threats, just fact, just truth. The land behind me seemed to hold its own breath, the trees standing tall and dark, the animals still and watching, the air thick with something powerful and old. Those agents looked around nervously, shifting their clipboards from hand to hand like they were holding shields made of paper, and the fear rolling off them smelled sharp and real. The lead agent tried to pretend he wasn't shaken, but his voice wobbled when he said, "Sir, we can discuss this properly." His words floated weak into the air, too thin to stand on their own, and I just shook my head slow. There was no discussion left to have, not after the way they stormed up here, not after the way they walked over my land, not after the way they treated my home like a box to check off. I kept walking toward them, slow steps, controlled steps, the shotgun resting calmly in my arms, and they began backing up without even realizing they were doing it. Instinct pushing their feet before their minds caught up. Their fear didn't give me satisfaction, it gave me space to breathe, space to stand tall, space to reclaim the ground. They'd tried to take the night, swallowed the space between us until only a thin layer of dust and moonlight hung in the air. And the lead agent finally realized this wasn't going his way. He lifted a hand, palm outward, a small surrender gesture. He didn't even mean to make. His voice came out thin and nervous. "We will revisit this matter at a later date." I didn't blink, didn't nod, didn't even breathe deep. I said, "You won't come back unless you're invited." He swallowed hard, a visible swallow, a scared swallow. Behind him, the agents scrambled. They tripped over each other, They whispered hurried things, they moved like a storm of nervous birds, and one by one, they turned toward their fancy black SUVs, voices shaking, steps unsteady. Their confidence shattered like glass dropped on stone. The ranch stood tall behind me. I stood tall with its shotgun in my arms, fire in my chest, strength in my bones, and every part of me knew, every inch of me understood the line had been drawn, and I wasn't ever letting them cross it again. The moment I stepped off that porch with the shotgun resting easy in my arms, the world shifted. The whole damn ranch went quiet in a way I had never felt before, like the air itself pressed pause, waiting to see what would happen next. Moonlight washed across the dirt, turning everything silver and soft. But the tension between me and those HOA agents was so sharp, I swear you could have sliced it clean with a pocket knife. They had been bold just minutes ago, strutting around my land like big city roosters, puffing out their chests, talking fancy, writing notes, pointing at things they didn't understand. But the second they saw that shotgun against my arm, their whole attitude cracked clean in half. I didn't hold it high. I didn't raise it. I didn't threaten. I simply held it the way a rancher holds a piece of his own history, steady and sure, like a reminder carved out of wood and steel that said real clear, this is my home. This is my line. And you damn well crossed it. The closest agent, a short fellow with glasses too shiny for outdoor work, froze mid-step. 1 foot lifted off the ground like he forgot how to walk, his clipboard slipping from his fingers and landing in the dust with a soft thud. His eyes got so wide, they almost swallowed the moonlight. He whispered something like, "Oh Lord," but his voice was so soft the wind nearly took it away. Another one, tall, skinny guy with a tie fluttering in the night breeze, stumbled backwards so fast he kicked up a cloud of dust that wrapped around his legs like smoke, and he waved his arms trying to steady himself, mumbling things that sounded like, "This ain't worth it, man." His calm professional mask shattered right there, dropping faster than his fancy leather notebook. The lead agent, the same one who marched onto my land like he owned the soil under his shiny shoes, stared at me with a pale face that didn't match his confident tone from earlier. And I watched fear creep across his expression, slow but steady like frost growing on a window pane. He tried to swallow his worry, but the lump caught in his throat, and I could see his Adam's apple bob up and down like a nervous rabbit. None of them expected this. None of them thought I'd stand firm. None of them imagined a rancher would push back against their polished authority. They expected submission, obedience, quiet surrender. But when their eyes locked onto me standing tall with the shotgun in my arms, they realized real fast that this wasn't that kind of land, and I wasn't that kind of man. The wind shifted gently, blowing dust across the yard, and it carried the faint smell of cedar and dry grass mixed with the sharp scent of fear rolling off those men like sweat on a hot day. The ranch animals fell completely silent, the horses frozen, their ears locked forward like statues carved out of shadow and moon. And even the cattle stopped their slow shuffling, all of them watching the men like nature itself was judging them. Only the dogs kept moving, circling me slow and cautious, their bodies tense, their tails stiff, their eyes locked on the strangers like they were waiting for a signal. I took a slow breath, letting the air fill my lungs, letting the calm settle deep in my bones. And I said nothing, not one word. I didn't need to. My silence was louder than any threat. It echoed around those men like thunder rolling through a canyon. It told them everything, that I wasn't scared, that I wasn't backing down, that this land was mine. The lead agent tried to square his shoulders, tried to pretend he still had control, tried to muster up that same fake confidence he carried earlier. But the shaking in his hands betrayed him, and the moonlight exposed that tremble like a spotlight on a stage. He reached up to adjust his tie, though it didn't need adjusting. A nervous habit of a man who had always hidden behind rules and paperwork, but never faced a real challenge. When he finally found the courage to open his mouth, his words came out soft and uneven. "Sir, let us be reasonable." Reasonable, that word almost made me laugh. They stormed my land without warning, pushed past my fences, frightened my animals, talked down to me like I was some kid who didn't know a hammer from a shovel. And now they wanted reasonable. But I didn't laugh, I didn't flinch, I didn't let my emotions spill out in a way that could be twisted against me. I kept still, kept quiet, kept my eyes fixed on them, with a look calm as stone and strong as steel. The tall agent with the fluttering tie took a few steps backward, raising both his hands like I was holding the shotgun pointed at him, even though it rested safe against my arm, pointing at nothing but the ground. He said, all right, we're leaving. No need for this, sir. We'll just go." Easy now, easy. His voice broke on the second easy. You could feel the panic spreading through them like wildfire jumping across dry grass. One agent dropped his tablet when he tried to shove it into his bag too fast, and it landed with a loud crack that made him jump. Another agent yanked on the door handle of one of the SUVs with shaking hands, unable to get a grip because he was sweating so much. The last two stood completely frozen, staring at me like they were seeing a ghost or some living nightmare rising out of the dust. I didn't move closer, didn't raise my voice, didn't lift the shotgun, didn't threaten them in any way. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is stand still, stand with purpose, stand with truth, and let the world feel the weight of it. And they felt it. Every last one of them felt it deep. The lead agent finally forced himself to step backward, his foot sliding in the dirt, his gaze never leaving the shotgun in my arms, and he lifted both hands, chest height, like he was surrendering to a slow-moving storm. He said, "We will document this incident, sir." His voice cracked on the word incident, and he tried to cover it with a cough. "Document it." I stood there thinking, go ahead, write your little stories, type your little reports, show your bosses whatever you want, because paper can't capture the heart of a man standing between his home and the ones trying to take it. The agents kept backing up, their polished shoes slipping in the dirt they weren't used to, their fancy clothes catching dust on the wind. They looked like city dolls lost in a desert. They didn't understand, out of place, out of depth, out of courage. The moon hung above them, bright and bold, lighting their pale, scared faces like a lantern held over guilty men. The whole ranch looked like something out of an old Western painting, shadows stretching long across the land, dust swirling slow, animals watching without sound, and me standing there calm and unmoving with the shotgun in my arms like a part of the land itself. One agent whispered, "Let's go, man, let's just go. I'm not dying out here tonight." Dying? I wasn't even threatening them. But fear twists the mind, turns shadows into monsters, turns silence into danger. They created their own terror simply by seeing a man who refused to be stepped on. The lead agent stumbled toward the SUV, tripping over a loose rock like a city man who had never walked real dirt, and he caught himself on the hood with a shaky grunt. His palm left a smear of sweat across the shiny metal. Another agent ran around the truck so fast he almost slammed into the side, fumbling with the door like a scared kid trying to get inside his house before something grabs him. The sound of doors slamming echoed across the ranch like fireworks in an empty field. 1, 2, 3, 4, over and over as each agent dove into their SUV, their faces wild with panic, their bodies shaking, their breaths fogging the cold night air through the glass windows. The lead agent hesitated only a second longer, one last shaky glance in my direction, and for a moment his eyes met mine. In that short second his fear hit me like a gust of wind. Not fear of dying, fear of consequence, fear of being wrong, fear of facing a man who wouldn't bow. He scrambled inside the SUV, slamming the door so hard the whole vehicle rocked, and he barked something to the driver, a fast, shaky order I couldn't hear, but I didn't need. Two engines roared, headlights flared, tires spun, kicking up dust so thick it rolled into the air like smoke from a burning haystack. One SUV jerked backward so fast it nearly hit the one behind it, and the driver shouted something, panicked, swerving before speeding down the dirt road. The others followed fast, one after another, fishtailing in the loose gravel, their perfect formation gone, replaced by pure fear, and messy, scrambling dust clouds rose behind them, drifting through the night air like ghosts fleeing the ranch. Their red tail lights cut through the darkness, bouncing and jerking as they sped away, shrinking smaller and smaller until they vanished behind the hills, leaving nothing behind but tire tracks and silence. I stood there long after they disappeared, still, steady, silent, breathing slow and deep, while the ranch breathed with me. The shotgun rested warm against my arm. The moon glowed bright above, and the land felt safe again, not because of the gun, but because I stood my ground. The dust those SUVs kicked up was still floating in the air like slow-moving smoke when the night finally went quiet again. A deep, heavy quiet that settled across the ranch like a blanket made of darkness and old memories. And I just stood there for a long moment, letting my heart catch up to everything my body had just gone through. The shotgun rested warm against my arm, not raised, not pointed, just held the way a man holds something that means more than steel and wood, something that stands for home and history and the kind of strength you only learn by surviving every damn storm life throws at you. The dogs stayed close beside me, their bodies still tense, their eyes trained on the dirt road long after the tail lights disappeared behind the hills. and I could feel their worry vibrating through them. Like a humming wire, the horses were still clustered near the fence line, ears pinned forward, tails flicking, their eyes shining like silver coins in the moonlight as they watched the dust settle where the agents had stood. Even the cattle stayed grouped together, breathing slow and heavy, noses brushing the dirt as if trying to make sense of the strange scent those city men left behind. The air was cool now, the heat of the day swallowed by the dark, and the breeze carried the clean smell of earth and cedar and sky back into the space the agents had polluted with their cologne and worry and high-ego nonsense. It felt like the land itself exhaled with me, like it had been holding its breath the whole time, like it was waiting to see if I would stand firm or crumble. I didn't move for a long moment, didn't think, didn't speak, just listened to the sound of my own breathing mixing with the soft rustle of grass in the night wind. And then the weight of everything hit me all at once, the fear, the anger, the adrenaline, the fight. The moment my heart snapped, the moment those men realized real quick they had messed with the wrong ranch. My knees went weak for just a second, like my body remembered the danger even after my mind let it go. And I let out a breath, so deep it felt like it came from somewhere way down inside my soul. I whispered into the night, "You're safe now, buddy." Talking to the land, the animals, the home, and maybe to myself too. Because I had carried fear in my chest all day, and now it was finally starting to slip out of me, like smoke drifting off a dying fire. The dust slowly settled back to the ground in soft gray clouds, wrapping the earth in a faint haze. And I looked down the dirt road, the same road that brought those agents in like storm clouds and carried them back out like terrified children running from shadows. The night sky stretched above the ranch, wide and endless, full of stars shining bright, like tiny lanterns hung by some old hand in the sky. And the moon watched over me like a quiet guardian, calm and steady. The ranch was mine again, whole and undisturbed, untouched except for the tire tracks carved deep into the earth. I walked toward the gate, slow and steady, my boots crunching on gravel and dust, the shotgun still resting against my arm, the wind brushing against my skin like it was trying to cool the leftover fire in my blood. The dogs followed close at my heels, sniffing the ground, tails low, but finally relaxing just a little now that the danger was gone. The moon cast long shadows across the land, shadows that stretched toward the hills where the SUVs had vanished, shadows that looked like fingers reaching out to pull the fear away piece by piece. When I reached the gate, I stopped and placed my hand on it, feeling the cold metal under my palm, remembering the way that agent shoved it open earlier without asking. Without respect, a shiver ran up my spine, not of fear, but of anger mixing with something deeper, something old. I whispered to the gate, "You're mine. Everything behind you is mine. No one storms through you without facing me first." The wind carried my whisper away across the open land. I looked out at the empty dirt road, and in the quiet of the night, I could almost hear the echoes of the agents' tires skidding on the gravel, their panicked voices yelling at each other, the thudding of doors slamming like frightened hearts in metal cages. They had shown up like kings of the world. They left like prey running from a predator they never expected to find in a quiet rancher. I took one last breath of the open night before turning back toward the house, and the calm settling over me now felt different than the calm before all this trouble started. This wasn't the calm of peace. This was the calm after standing your ground, the calm after choosing strength, the calm after surviving something meant to break you. As I walked back across the yard, the animals slowly returned to their natural rhythm, the horses snorting and shaking off their fear, the cattle lifting their heads and grazing again, the dogs loosening their tense bodies and trotting around me with soft wagging tails. They felt safe again because they felt me steady again. I stepped onto the porch, the boards creaking under my weight, and leaned the shotgun gently against the railing beside me. I didn't put it back inside. Not yet, not tonight. I sank down onto the porch steps, elbows resting on my knees, hands hanging loose, letting the cool night air wash over my skin and the exhaustion roll through me like a wave. My heart still beat slow and heavy, each beat echoing in my chest like a soft drum played by old hands. The dogs settled beside me, one resting his head on my boot, the other lying close enough that I could feel his warmth against my leg. The stars sparkled above, the moon hung bright, and the whole ranch glowed under the quiet silver light, looking soft and strong at the same time, like something worth fighting for, worth bleeding for, worth standing tall for, even if the world came knocking with threats. In suits, I closed my eyes for a second and felt the land hum beneath me. A deep, steady hum like a heartbeat sleeping under the soil. I whispered thank you under my breath, thanking the land, the sky, the animals, the strength inside me. All of it, even the fear, because fear only exists to show us what matters. After a while, I opened my eyes and looked out across the ranch, the fences, the barns, the pasture stretching wide and dark, and my chest swelled with something sharp and beautiful pride. Home, claim, belonging, all tangled together in a way that made my throat tight. I imagined those agents still driving fast down the county road, breathing hard, shaking, checking the mirrors like they expected me to come riding out of the darkness behind them. Their perfect hair, messed up, their talk, all broken, their nerves shot, their dignity left behind on my soil. And I couldn't lie, a small part of me felt a fierce satisfaction knowing they'd remember this night. For a long time, they'd remember the ranch, the man, the dogs, the silence, the shotgun held calm and steady. They'd remember how it felt to run, how their legs wobbled, how their voices trembled, how the land itself seemed to push them away. The wind brushed against my back again, and the ranch settled deeper into its usual rhythm. The crickets returning, the owls calling somewhere far off, the trees swaying slow, life returning slow but steady. I sat there until my muscles relaxed and my breath stopped carrying leftover fear, until the last bit of old tension finally leaked out of me and into the night air. Then I stood, picking up the shotgun again, holding it reverently, carrying it inside the house where the warm wooden air greeted me like an old friend. I placed it back onto the rack, slow and careful, letting it settle into the cradle that had held it for years. When it rested there, the house itself seemed to calm, the floor settling under my boots, the walls breathing easy. I stepped back outside one last time before bed and stood on the porch, looking out over the land that had stood with me. The night was deep and still. The ranch was whole, the danger was gone, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly untouchable.